everyone. So once again, my name is Marius Jurgilas. I'm the co-founder of Axiology, but also a chairman of the Council of Vilnius University, as well as the board member of Global Lithuanian Leaders. So very happy to moderate this panel. The topic of a panel discussion is now and the future and linked with investments. And we'll have a very distinguished panel here. And we're very happy to have here, in some sense, representatives of the government and the Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation. And I would like to give the floor to set the scene and give us a 10 minutes maximum presentation on the status of Lithuania's achievements.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I think the discussion is going to be more interesting, so I will try to stick to 10 minutes. So the topic of my keynote is going to be on Lithuania's investment ambitions. International business, attracting international business, creating an environment for local companies to grow and to compete on global stage is an important priority for us. But when reflecting on our current strengths and on what we managed to achieve, there are at least two camps in Lithuania. There are people who are very pessimistic about our economic situation, doomsayers who are talking that Lithuania is disappearing and our economic prowess is gone. And there is another camp that is celebrating all the major achievements and is thinking that the job is done. And there is a middle ground between these two camps. And I think reflecting on what we have today, there are some things that to celebrate, but there's also a long way to go. And first of all, let's talk about that foreign direct investment. So we, as a country, are saying that, okay, these are record times for Lithuania. The amount of investment that was attracted to Lithuania, it hit a record last year. All right, but when we take a more global perspective, we see that, yes, it's a good achievement, but in comparison to some other countries, it's not that impressive. If you compare ourselves to Ireland, we'll see that the numbers, our numbers are in hundreds of millions, Ireland's numbers are in billions of euros. What does it mean? It means we still have room to grow. The other aspect, we are celebrating the tools, the initiatives that we put in place. One of them is Green Corridor for large-scale investors, meaning that investors that reach certain thresholds, we have a lot of tax incentives, regulatory procedures, and so on. That's good. That's a good step in the right direction. We have it since 2021. But if we take a more global perspective, we understand that most European countries at the moment have similar tools. So we are thinking that we have a competitive advantage, but the reality is that most European countries have something similar in place. Let's look at another dimension, the competitiveness ranking. So because some other countries are doing quite poorly right now, we managed to climb 9 positions in competitiveness rankings. So this would seem like Lithuania is becoming much more competitive. But at the same time, if we look at the headlines, we see that the number of challenges is actually increasing. We have global trade uncertainty, we have geopolitical threats, we have increasing competition from other countries for Lithuanian investments as well as for foreign investments. And in addition to that, we have bureaucratic problems and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's not that good times in terms of potential challenges to Lithuania's economy. But as a country, when looking at this very complicated picture, we have a choice to make. And the choice is whether to, how do we respond to these challenges, how do we respond to this reality, that sometimes, somewhere we are doing quite well, but the number of challenges is increasing. One choice is to be resilient. You know the word resilience, resilient organizations and so on, which are managed to tackle these challenges and still remain strong. The problem with resilience is that over time, you are staying where you are. The other pathway that we can take is to become anti-fragile. Anti-fragility means that with every challenge, you become stronger. You embrace those challenges and you innovate, and that's the way you become stronger. So as a country, facing this more difficult environment, difficult investment climate, increasing competition, other countries doing new tools to attract top businesses, we have a choice to make, to innovate. And this is the path that we are taking. Our strategy focuses on increasing Lithuania's ambition for investments, for innovation, for talent promotion in the times that are really difficult. So the times are difficult, but we see a potential to become much, much stronger. The ambition that we formed for ourselves is for Lithuania to attract at least 10 billion euros in strategic investments over the next few years. This is an ambitious target, especially when we are considering the numbers that we already have. The numbers that we have is that we are attracting 200 to 300 million euros in foreign direct investment, that we are attracting 200 million in startup funding. We want to increase these numbers to billions of euros every year. How we are going to achieve that? The core of our strategy is radical efficiency and regulation. 2 weeks ago, Lithuania's parliament passed a new regulation that is called Investment Highway. It is a radical approach to regulation, shortening certain procedures at least 2 times, and for some project times, 10 times, and even more. It means that the time between a potential investor or local or foreign company making a decision to invest, the time between this moment and the actual construction, starting of real works, we want to reduce this time at least 2 times, and for defense industry projects it will be 12 times. So this is already the law in Lithuania. So the projects that we are going to attract, we will be able to start in months rather than years. The other thing where we already actually made some changes is with fintech. We know that financial technology is the story that we have to celebrate, which is a really positive development in Lithuania. But we need to improve the competitive advantages that we have so that we remain relevant in this industry. So what we did, we passed changes to regulation, so Lithuania actually has favorable conditions for low-risk financial technology companies. Companies such as technology giants, marketplaces that want to have their own payment infrastructure. So it's a streamlined regulation that creates more favorable conditions for these businesses. In addition to that, we understand that if you want to attract investments, you have to talk money. So we are focusing on creating new financial weaponry for Lithuania to be able to compete for innovations, for top-end investments from global companies. And we understand that we need to put real resources in order to achieve the ambitions that we have. We also want to attract investments that would create new stock industries in Lithuania, from defense to semiconductors, from clean technologies to data centers, as well as our historical strengths in life sciences, ICT, and financial technology. Furthermore, we also want to solve the challenge of industrial sites. We cannot allow as a country to lose investments because we do not have industrial sites in place. And we'll be solving that by expanding the existing free economic zones, by creating new free economic zones, and we have specific numbers in mind when it comes to establishing these new free economic zones. Finally, the good news is that over the next few years, Lithuania is going to have a new competitive advantage. And it's going to be green energy. Lithuania's ambition is to be fully producing electricity from renewable sources over the next 3 years. So in the year 2028, we want to be producing all the electricity we need from renewable sources. And then we want to be exporting it and also attracting energy-intensive industries to Lithuania. This is the advantages that we can have here because of our natural resources and because of our business environment. Finally, all these measures and initiatives that we have, we want to create stronger Lithuania's value proposition that talks the language of global businesses, that talks the language of the bottom line, that meets the pain points that global companies have, whether they are Lithuanian companies or global companies. So the first advantage that we are really focusing on is the speed. Investment highway, fintech regulation, it's all about the speed. The second thing is next generation infrastructure, from AI infrastructure to industrial sites to green energy. The third pillar of our new improved value proposition is, of course, talent. We understand that Lithuania needs to become much more competitive in attracting international talent. And finally, when it comes to the bottom line of international companies, tax incentives, triple deduction for R&D, cashbacks, we mean business. So this is what we are working on, and this is what's going to allow for Lithuania to be much more competitive for investments. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to join the discussion that's going to take place.
Thank you, Marius Stasiukaitis, once again, Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation. And before we proceed to the panel discussion, let me remind the theme is investing in our future. Let me use the role of a moderator to tell you a story which puts us in perspective. And Lithuanians also always like to measure ourselves against. And which country do we usually measure ourselves against? Estonia. This time it will not be Estonia. Yes. So my phone rings, and there's a call from the president's office saying, Marius, in the fall we're doing this competitiveness panel discussion, and we really want to understand, what drove the latest achievements of Lithuania. We are super impressed, and we think that this is some kind of really big achievement, and we really want to understand it. Can you help us understand it? And that, of course, is coming from the president of Latvia. So in Latvia, Latvians believe that Lithuania is an economic phenomenon. So I did a study, I looked around, and you know what? I didn't find an oil in the ground. I couldn't find any very specific things that set us apart. But one thing, and I really liked your discussion, introduction to our discussion, there are many small things that in combination put Lithuania apart. So for example, one thing, that Lithuanian economy is very diversified compared to some of our peers. In 2014, Lithuania stopped trading with our Eastern, I wouldn't say friends anymore, right? Eastern cohabitants, and other countries didn't. So we had a huge adjustment. We did it 10 years ago. Others had to do it later. So on investment into the future. So let me remind you, on the panel we have Einaras von Gravok, investor, shark, leader in, and also an American Lithuanian living in the United States. And we have Agne, who is going to tell us more about geopolitical situation. We also have Vytautas Šilinskas, who's representing Investors Forum, and also ex-vice minister in social affairs. But what we decided to do before in our panel discussion preparation, we decided not to touch, the important things. we'll be talking about the future. So on that, Einari, you have successfully founded and scaled several tech companies. I'm not going to mention the names. What key lessons from these experiences could Lithuania adopt to foster innovation that competes on a global scale? Because we don't need local champions. We're shooting for the stars.
Well, I guess ultimately we have the same advantage, pro and a con with Lithuania, us being so small as a country. The con is that being small, you're a little bit afraid, not bold enough, you're afraid of sort of little mouse, afraid of touching the elephant and irritating it, right? So that's one of the things that I think we've collectively sort of spent the last couple of decades working out of our systems, being bolder, aiming higher, and setting bigger and bigger milestones for ourselves. But that's very much still in progress, which brings me to the same pro. Being small means that the local market is way too small, right? So essentially, when you start, you're supposed to be thinking globally out of the gates. You have to think about the biggest market out there possible, which is the world. So as you look at the success stories in Lithuania, those have really nailed it and made it, all of them started with the same approach. Let's go after the US, let's become the biggest company out there, and then expand, to the rest of the world. As opposed to the old story of, Lithuania today, Latvia tomorrow, and maybe Poland a few years from now, right? So that boldness, that ability to imagine, sort of not set a ceiling for yourself and aim sky high, I think it's somewhat intuitive in the tech sector, not necessarily across all the other industries. It's also a cliche, but it's the first ingredient, it's the most important mindset.
So does that mean that we need to invest in the United States?
We as individual companies, we absolutely must. I think there's obviously a distinction between Lithuania and the government, Lithuania the people, and Lithuania the business, right? So drawing that distinction as a business, that's where you, in my opinion, especially software business, you've got to start there. You have to build for them. It's the biggest market, by far the easiest market, given the size and sort of lack of red tape, relatively speaking, and uniformity across all states. Having said that, there's a lot of ingredients that go into, all of that. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, about talent at some point here. In our own example, we're somewhat unique, not that unique, but we're somewhat different in that while our core is Lithuanian, many of us live in the United States, live in Europe, live globally. So we enter new markets, new domains, thinking, well, geez, the world is changing. We're going to create a company that drives that change, and we're going to make sure that we're number one in whatever space we enter. It just so happens to be that we can build from Lithuania to solve those problems.
So would you agree that kind of Lithuania gave you the opportunity, and of course, you have international family roots, and you saw this opportunity very quickly. But if I can counterject a little bit, we want to have in Lithuania as successful companies in Silicon Valley. We'd like to have them here, the talent to be coming here, investments coming here, American VCs investing in companies in Lithuania. What do we have to do to become more attractive?
Well, want is a tricky word. There's a lot of things I want, right? There's ambitions without a plan don't count for much. That was a presentation about the plan, so I'm still reflecting on it. It's maybe the first time I've seen a plan with a goal, with a number. That's this part of the problem, right? When you build a business, you have goals. I'm going to do X this year, Y next year, Z the year after. We talk about what is tomorrow and how we're going to achieve tomorrow. Tomorrow needs to be defined as well. So suppose if tomorrow means $10 billion in direct investment by 2030, it's a nice goal to work backwards. Why will that capital come here? All industries are different, and I'm sure some capex heavy industries require a lot of grants, a lot of support. I'm not going to touch those. It's not my forte, not something I understand very well. In terms of software, AI, the new age industries, there's two key ingredients: more talented people, less government. 1 and 2. The less red tape you got to deal with, the less government is involved, period. wherever your country that you operate in is, and the more talented people. And we can draw contrast. Like if you want to do this in Hungary, forget about it. It's you know, a nightmare. Don't do that. Lithuania is like you know, is like Silicon Valley, Wild West compared to Hungary. So there's distinctions here in Europe, and there's trends that you can play up and advertise. It's not ideal, it's not perfect by any means, but it's a lot stronger than peers.
Thank you. Vytautai, I think you are very much, you know, very well placed to tell us, you know, what investors are thinking when they're coming to Lithuania, when they land here, when they invest or choose not to invest. And I was using the example from Latvia, right? So, of course, some of you who are following the business media saw this blip in the news that something happened for the direct investments in Lithuania. That this particular 12 months was not very successful compared to, you know, Latvians who think that, you know, we are the phenomenon of economic growth. So what are the investors thinking about Lithuania these days?
I think, hello? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I think I'll address the elephant in the room, and what our survey showed that not only investors but also CEOs in Lithuania are mostly worried about geopolitics, right? We have the enemy at the door, and people are afraid to invest, to make the decisions until the war is ended. So people are waiting and not making a huge investment or huge decisions. That's the first. And the second topic that people, or mostly CEOs or other people making the decisions were worried were taxes. So again, this didn't help. The tax reform, I wouldn't say it's terrible. The financial effect to the budget won't be huge. It's just, you know, the tendency that it's not, the decisions aren't towards the better investment climate, although it's only a little bit worse, but still a little bit towards worse tendency. So I think that's the two biggest concerns for the investors in Lithuania. Not only for those who are considering coming to Lithuania, but also for those who are already in Lithuania as well. So for that, we must make people feel safe. One thing which we do and I think help is bringing people here. So I don't know, maybe you'll tell different, but as far as I heard talking with some US citizens, they thought, okay, that Lithuania might be really close to Ukraine, like Shaheds are flying here and bombs are falling. So when they come to Vilnius and see that, you know, we happy, nice people, it's safe, people are creating businesses, enjoying their lives, they feel safer and they calm down and they can make this rational decision to invest in Lithuania.
Let's ask the audience, how many of you then, if you came to Lithuania from a foreign country, thought of your physical safety? The hypothesis is denied, at least from this potential investor base. But you know, Latvia is not very far away from the border. Actually, in some of the plans that we have seen, you know, it's the pinnacle of potential, you know, tension. It's not, you know, the Suwalks actually, which everyone is talking about. So what our neighbors are doing better, or what we can do compared to what we are doing right now? What are your counterparts telling you? What do you see?
Yeah, the third topic is probably that we must address is middle income trap. I'm not sure if you heard about that, but World Trade Organization followed 100 countries over the period of 50 years. And they noticed that 80% of the countries achieved middle income. So it's easy to achieve, you know, from becoming poor to having middle income for the countries as well. But only 2 in 10 countries managed to achieve the high income. And we are at the top of the middle income or at the bottom of the high income, maybe even at the bottom of the high income. So, and the issue is that you have stopped competing on cheaper labor price, and you must start competing on speed, innovation, investment climate, and so on. So it's good that we managed to achieve this let's say, middle income not over the 50 years. We managed to achieve that faster over the 35 years, but the tools that we had previously do not work in this environment. We need new tools, and we need to learn to work with the new tools.
Yeah. Agriculture is not exactly the high productive sector, but there was a dramatic change in Lithuania, even compared to our Baltic fellows. Over the last 5 years, the amount of people working in agriculture in Lithuania decreased by 50%. And all of them, of course, went to IT or other high value sectors. But yeah, productivity.
May I expand on this number?
Very quickly.
It's a really good indicator if you want to look how advanced countries, how many people work in agriculture, because every economy starts from food. You can't have economy without food. In the 90s, we had 23% of people working in agriculture. Now it's around 5%, but for US it's around 1 or 2%, or UK it's also around 1%, France it's around 3%. So, okay, we managed to leap ahead a lot, but still reducing in double, it's fine. It's good that we're doing that.
Yes, so I'll finish on this and I'll switch to our other panelists. But recently announced budget that now for European Union, that is being contested as we speak, you know, they have sleepless nights and everything. Still, the biggest part goes to agriculture. So maybe we should realign somehow, but let's defer it to some other discussion. Back to geopolitics. Agnia. Investors apparently are, and you know, we can joke, we can pat ourselves on the shoulder, but you know, physical safety and you know, being sure that you know, your factory will not be blown apart is an important factor. What we can do as a country, geopolitically speaking, to ensure, to provide more safety guarantees or to send a different message. How can we invest in our safety?
Absolutely. You know, I was really hoping to speak on more optimistic topics, but as a geopolitics expert, and naturally we have to address security here. And without a doubt, if we look at the map, if we look at the newspaper headlines, we can't ignore this topic. Security is on the forefront of minds of investors. It's on the forefront of minds, I'm sure, of your families, yourselves as well. And today, while there are a lot of discussions, who can pick up the slack, whether it's going to be the United States, whether it's going to be Europe, who is going to defend the eastern flank of NATO, the reality is we have to show here that we are willing to pick up that slack, that we're willing to invest in our own security. Nearly a year ago, a study was done by Stronger Together with think tankers from Washington, D.C. that calculated that about 10 billion are needed for Lithuania to withstand an invasion from Russia, basically to withstand the first 10 days until NATO support arrives. It's a number that is feasible for us. Our economy is booming, our businesses are booming, and if we want that to continue, we have to be willing to invest. Here, maybe I draw a parallel. I know it was a big discussion whether Lithuania can afford those 5%, right? Can we afford it? If we look at the example of Israel, I mean, Israel, over various times of its history, has spent up to 30% of its GDP, then at different times up to 17% of its GDP to ensure its security. So again, this is an area where we'll have to invest and first show our own resolve. You know, on the good side, on the good news, the 5% has been approved, and over the next 5 years, 12 billion are allocated for defense, for boosting our long-term defensive capabilities. But I would still say, as the study pointed out, you know, we may face some risks before the 5 years are up, before we have fully implemented all of our long-term defense strategies. So that immediate, shorter-term investment to withstand any sort of, not just necessarily look at an attack, but any sort of threats to our resilience, to the resilience of our society would be necessary. And I'm hoping for some better news questions then.
let's talk business. You know, this panel is about investments. So defense is now being placated as, you know, the next big thing. You know, it's not fintech, it's not deep tech, it's defense now. There's nothing better than you hardcore public procurement, which, you know, is in billions and you win it. So everyone understands that. But the question for a country of the size of Lithuania is, do we invest in hardcore equipment? Do we invest in morale? Or we support the German troops? The only support for German troops is how much, 5 billion that we need over the next 10 years. That's only that. Or we invest in building some kind of geopolitical relationships with other countries which will be obliged or feel more obliged to come to our support beyond the 5th article of NATO. There was a period in time, not very long ago, when all Europe was in disarray, you know, and the word on the street in Lithuanian defense quarters was only bilateral agreements. That's it, you know, let's talk to Polish, let's talk to the Norwegians to make sure that we have some kind of backup plan. So, as a positive spin, where should we focus, you know, our limited resources? Or, you know, how does it look from your perspective?
So indeed, we have very limited resources, and we also have limited resources when it comes to people, our population, so our talents, which in fact I would say are Lithuania's greatest resource. That's essentially the only resource that we have, and our talents can help us solve some of these problems. The defense industry is also a vehicle for economic growth that has been well documented in economic studies. The Cold War period, the post-World War II period, for instance, grew the American economic success story. I think this defense sector of Israel as well was very instrumental to its own startup culture and industrial, innovative growth. So I would also view this for Lithuania not just a burden that we have to bear, not just a risk that we constantly have to face, but also as an opportunity to grow R&D, to grow new industries that can become our competitive advantage. But at the same time, we have to continue investing in what I said are our greatest resource, our talents, their education, their civic education, and the resilience of society. And of course, this is a very broad question and a very comprehensive approach that's needed.
Thank you, Agne. Back to Marius. So you gave us a presentation and we saw kind of the priority sectors. And I reflect back into a period in my lifetime when I was in a research council. I was always kind of thrown back by the list of priorities. Very long. Usually it's like not less than 10 in terms of priorities that we have. So if I remember correctly in your slides, there's 5 kind of priority sectors. But I missed defense there. Is this a statement or it's somewhere in the background, you know, because of course you can have IT, you can have innovations taking place in any place. So my question is, over the next 10 years, it's very difficult to say, right? But where do you see the next economic growth of Lithuania coming from? Is it going to be from agriculture? Or is it going to be from technology, selling products, establishing companies, global companies in the United States? Or is it going to be driven by what Israel has shown? Defense is also a sector in itself.
Okay. I don't know which microphone to use, so that's why I'm checking. Defense was in a slide. It was one of the 6 sectors that was mentioned. It seems quite long, but we are talking about very specific segments of large industries. So reflecting on the point that you touched regarding where the growth is going to come from, we need to understand that Lithuania is still going through a relatively early phase of its economic transformation. So we already have quite strong high technology sectors such as ICT, financial technology, some smart manufacturing, and some biotechnology companies. But when we take a more macroeconomic approach, we see that these industries still take a relatively small share of our economy. So if we talk about high-tech industries, it's 5% of our labor force. That's really low. Ireland is 10%. So we still have a lot of catching up to do. And this is where we see a lot of potential for Lithuania to get economic growth. Now, talking about specific vectors of growth, of course, ICT, startup scene, financial technology is going to be an increasingly important pillar of Lithuania's economic growth. We see that from the service exports over the last few years, and I think we're still going to see a lot of economic growth in this area. So that's why it's an important priority, and I think this is where the talent policy, attraction of international talents is going to play an important role in keeping this momentum. The other thing is, of course, life sciences. So in life sciences, I think there are two interesting angles. So historically, we put a lot of focus on biopharma, which is basically biotechnology, red biotechnology companies like Thermo Fisher Scientific, Teva, and some others. We also can connect our biotechnology strengths to the potential that we have in agriculture. Because one of the future arenas of economy is bioeconomy, where you use biotechnology to create new materials and new stuff from natural resources. So, for example, producing bioplastics from grain. And this is where Lithuania could excel because we have our biotechnology expertise. Defense industry is for sure going to be one of the pillars of economic growth. We're putting a lot of emphasis on that. And Rheinmetall's ammunition plant is the right step in direction, but we also see momentum in our startup ecosystem, where young Lithuanian businesses are developing their products, and at least in certain niches we can be really strong. And finally, we cannot forget our manufacturing prowess. Lithuania is still a country that is creating at least 20% of our GDP from manufacturing. But our manufacturing needs to become smarter and needs to utilize the potential of our green energy. So that's why we can become strong in smart engineering, in electronics, in semiconductors, in industries such as clean technologies. We have a potential here, and we have the scale, the cost base, and the regulation to achieve this ambition. So it's a more balanced approach to business. It's not just about ICT, but we see the most potential in these 5 to 6 areas that I discussed.
Mm-hmm. If we look at the labor productivity of Lithuania, it's not at the bottom, but lower part of the table for OECD countries, and also the change of it. Even compared to the Baltics, somehow we managed to become economically successful, but with a decreasing labor productivity. So the thing that has been driving Lithuanian economy is capital productivity and technological changes. And we are in the middle of Lithuanian global leaders gathering. So as a vice minister, what would you be looking for? What type of leadership is missing, or what do you see in Lithuanian economic sectors? What is the message that we would like to send to Lithuanian diaspora, not in general, but the leaders of Lithuanian diaspora here?
I think Lithuania really needs leaders here in our country, as well as in other countries working towards Lithuania's benefit. This is the thing about knowledge economy that is based around our knowledge and the people that we have. And from our side, we are really looking forward on cooperating in investment promotion, in innovation partnerships, and utilizing the potential that our broad diaspora have. But we also want to create conditions that are favorable to Lithuanians from abroad coming back to Lithuania to create their success stories here. And that's why I think it's also really important to have senior leaders from abroad coming back to work on the success stories here. And that's why we are working on providing favorable conditions for actually running this business here. So I talked about investment highway, talked about fintech regulation, and all sorts of things like that. So we want to be working on that, and so that Lithuania is the place to be.
Thank you very much. So we are approaching the last part of our discussion, and I would like to ask the panelists to think in a very brief way the answer to the question, which sounds like this. If you could suggest one bold initiative, one, for Lithuania to take forward immediately, what would it be, and what's the reason why you think it's the most important one? So I'll start first and allow you some time to reflect on this. So if you take an average citizen of the world and look at his kind of balance sheet, an average citizen in the world owes someone 3 times the annual wage. Not to each other, but in general. Like everyone in this room, if we represent like a country or an individual, we owe someone, right? And it's not the next person sitting next to you. Someone. Who is that person? What do you think?
Our children, next generation, right?
Exactly. We owe next generations. So even though on this panel we're talking about investments into the future, you know, we talk, but we act differently. We don't invest in the future. We borrow from the future. So my answer to this is, you know, if we really want to build a strong nation and we need to be very competitive, we need to invest in children. In a very broad sense, what that means. Is it education? Is childcare? Because with no children, there's no future. What's your answer to that question?
So it must be quick, right? So I've got 2 things. One is everyone needs to become AI native, AI first. Kindergartners, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, existing workforce. There's got to be a nationwide initiative making everyone AI first by 2030. That's going to be the fastest way to ramp up productivity. Secondly, as far as diaspora and people from abroad, we have to start recruiting them, you know, literally calling them, approaching them, tracking them, one-to-one type of a relationship. And I think that's what Israel
handcuffs
does.
into the plane and fly them into Lithuania?
That's what Israel does. If you're of Jewish descent, they'll call you again and again and again, and eventually many will come back.
Agne.
And I absolutely support that as well. Look, as a mother of 3 who has just moved back with my husband to Lithuania, I do believe that we should grow our talent pool here. Again, this is the only resource that we have. I think we should be even more ambitious today, even more ambitious than to try to attract Lithuanians, global Lithuanians to return back to Lithuania. I'd say Lithuania is ripe today to attract global talent, the best talent in the world. The study from last year showed that the youth of Lithuania, under 30, are the happiest in the world. We have all the right preconditions. And while that may seem a little bold today, in fact, I'd say 700 years ago, Gediminas was also similarly bold when he founded Vilnius. He was also attracting talent from Western Europe when he sent out his letters in 1323, inviting artisans, merchants, and other, at that time, productive, highly value-added, individuals. So I think we have to pick up the mantle from 700 years ago and keep going with this.
Thank you.
I'd say one thing, that the culture is a strategy, so we need to become and to stay ambitious, to be bold, and to face any challenge as an opportunity. And we can do, and we have done that. Let's say COVID, we were the fastest who recovered from COVID and provided the fastest economic growth. Let's say Lukashenko stomping on its protesting people, we attracted IT companies here. Lukashenko pushing the refugees, we built the fence and the illegal migration, and not only that, also transporting on any illegal goods also stopped through the border. Okay, Russia starts the war in Ukraine. We were the fastest who accepted Ukrainians not only to our homes, but also to the workplaces. And they were contributed greatly, some millions of euros, to our budget. And current crisis is also an opportunity. Europe will spend trillions of euros in defense. And we need to be ambitious, we need to be bold here, and we need to take this opportunity.
Mario.
I think I agree with all the points mentioned. But one of the things that we can do better is to actually use the potential that innovation has to solve the challenges that our country faces. Let's talk about education, the topic mentioned. Let's utilize the potential of AI and education technology to transform our education system. So I think there's a potential for this radical thinking in having the challenges in Lithuania, but then thinking of completely new ways how to utilize technological advancements to solve challenges. It's the same for defense industry. We can utilize defense innovation to create new source of capabilities that do not exist today. So this is, I think, where we have some homework to do as a country.
Thank you very much. So with that, we conclude this panel, and I would like to ask the audience to give a big round of applause to everyone. And let's build new technologies, attract talent. All of you are welcome to stay not only for tonight, but indefinitely. And let's build Lithuania as a home for everyone. Thank you.